Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're diving straight into something you literally do thousands of times a day without even thinking about it. We're talking about respiration. But listen, we aren't just talking about breathing air in and letting it out. We're going to look at the actual biological magic that unlocks the energy from the very foods you eat, keeping every single cell in your body alive and functioning. Okay, let's dive into this. If I ask you, hey, why do we breathe? The automatic answer is almost always, well, to get oxygen, obviously. And sure, that is absolutely true. But why do we need that oxygen so desperately? Is breathing merely about inflating and deflating our lungs like a pair of balloons? No way. Far from it. As you'll see today, taking in air is actually just the delivery mechanism for a much more complex, microscopic operation happening deep within us. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, unlocking energy. Second, aerobic versus anaerobic. Third, system anatomy. Fourth, mechanics of breathing. And finally, alveoli and hemoglobin. All right, section 1, unlocking energy. Let's start by connecting the dots between that last meal you ate and the energy literally pulsing through your tissues right this second. If you look at the strict biological definition of respiration, it doesn't even mention lungs or breathing at all. Respiration is simply the process of breaking down food to release energy. The oxygen we take in, it's really just a tool, a highly effective tool for sure, used to completely oxidize our food, specifically glucose, and turn it into usable cellular energy. Breathing is just the very first mechanical step of this incredible metabolic process. And this brilliantly illustrates how that breakdown actually happens. The first step of this whole thing always kicks off right in the cytoplasm of the cell. That's where a 6-carbon glucose molecule gets broken down into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate. This step happens no matter what. But what happens to that pyruvate next? Well, that depends entirely on whether oxygen is invited to the party. There are 3 distinct chemical pathways based purely on oxygen availability, and this applies to everything from tiny yeast cells all the way up to our own mitochondria. Moving on to section 2, aerobic versus anaerobic respiration. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive difference in efficiency and outcomes. In aerobic respiration, which requires free oxygen, glucose is completely oxidized. The byproducts are just carbon dioxide, water, and a huge, massive amount of energy. This is what happens in the mitochondria of higher organisms like us. But look at the anaerobic side. In the absence or even just a lack of oxygen, the breakdown is incomplete. Lower organisms like yeast produce ethanol. Or think about our own muscle cells. They might produce lactic acid during a sudden lack of oxygen. Actually, that's exactly what causes those awful muscle cramps when you exercise too hard. And the energy yields here, it is much lower. Okay, section 3, system anatomy. Let's zoom out from the chemistry for a second and track the step-by-step journey of a single breath of air. It enters through the nostrils, where it gets filtered by fine hairs and mucus. Then it travels down the throat and straight into the trachea, or your windpipe. From the trachea, the pathway divides and plunges into the lungs. It keeps narrowing down further and further, kind of like the branches of an upside-down tree, until it reaches these tiny terminal structures at the very end of the line, called the alveoli. But wait, before we move past the trachea, we've really got to appreciate a brilliant piece of anatomical design. The trachea is lined with these rings of cartilage. Why does that matter? Well, imagine sucking air really fast through a flimsy paper straw. It naturally collapses under the pressure, right? These cartilaginous rings are literally what ensure your air passage remains rigidly open at all times, completely preventing a collapse even when the internal pressure drops as you breathe in. It's an absolute game changer. Section 4, mechanics of breathing. Let's move to and see how this builds into the physical act of breathing. Inhalation is this wonderfully coordinated active process. First, your diaphragm, that really large muscle separating your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity, it completely flattens out. At the exact same time, your ribs rise up. This expands the overall size of your chest cavity. Because the volume inside your chest just got bigger, the air pressure naturally drops, and air from the outside atmosphere is literally sucked into the lungs to fill that empty space. But here is a fascinating detail for you. You never actually empty your lungs completely.
not even if you exhale as hard as you possibly can. The lungs always hold back what we call a residual volume of air during a regular breathing cycle. And this is a brilliantly crucial evolutionary design. It acts as a buffer. It ensures there is always sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed into the blood and for carbon dioxide to be released. It keeps that gas exchange going seamlessly, even in those brief split-second moments between your active breaths.
Finally, Section 5, alveoli and hemoglobin. So the crucial point is understanding how gas actually crosses over from our lungs and into our blood. Remember those alveoli we mentioned? They are these tiny, one-cell thick, balloon-like structures at the very end of the respiratory tract, and they are intricately wrapped in this massive network of blood capillaries. And their balloon-like shape? That is no accident. It dramatically maximizes the surface area available for gas exchange. It's right here that oxygen simply diffuses from the alveolar air directly into the bloodstream, while waste carbon dioxide diffuses right back out to be exhaled. But here's the catch, right? Simple diffusion alone is an incredibly slow process. In a big, complex organism like a human, diffusion is way too sluggish to meet our intense oxygen demands. And that is exactly where hemoglobin steps in. Hemoglobin is the respiratory pigment found inside our red blood cells. Think of it like a massive fleet of highly specialized microscopic delivery trucks. It has a very high affinity for oxygen. That means it tightly grabs onto those oxygen molecules at the alveoli and efficiently transports them through the bloodstream to every single demanding cell throughout your entire body. Which brings us to our final critical question. What actually happens to our bodies if this whole delivery system fails? Well, if we suffer from a deficiency of hemoglobin, our red blood cells lose their capacity to effectively transport that essential oxygen. This condition, which you might know as anemia, literally starves your body cells of the oxygen they need to perform that aerobic cellular respiration we talked about at the very beginning. And without it, your energy production simply plummets. It is just a powerful reminder of how flawlessly interconnected these biological systems have to be just to keep us energized. So, if our bodies evolved this incredibly complex, microscopic machinery just to extract energy from a simple breath of air, what other untapped biological magic do you think is happening inside your cells right now? Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.